our top story this hour, China says the United States, Australia and the United Kingdom are traveling further down the wrong and dangerous path for their own geopolitical self-interest as they finalize an agreement to purchase nuclear-powered attack submarines. A foreign ministry spokesperson in Beijing said today the arrangement, given the acronym Aukus, arises from, and I quote, typical Cold War mentality and only helped to motivate an arms race. Well, our chief correspondent John Cookson has the story.
Yesterday in San Diego, the US, the UK and Australia unveiled details of their plan for a new fleet of nuclear-powered submarines aimed at countering China's influence in the Indo-Pacific region.
So today, as we stand at the inflection point in history, where the hard work of enhancing deterrence and promoting stability is going to affect the prospect of peace for decades to come, the United States can ask for no better partners in the Indo-Pacific, where so much of our shared future will be written. Forging this new partnership, we're showing again how democracies can deliver our own security and prosperity, and not just for us, but for the entire world.
Under the so-called Aukus Pact, Australia is to get its first nuclear power subs, at least 3, from the US. The Allies will also work to create a new fleet using cutting-edge technology, including UK-made Rolls-Royce reactors. In another move, British Prime Minister Sunak is pledging to increase UK military funding by $6 billion in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the challenge posed by China.
Is China a threat?
China represents the biggest state threat to our economic interests, for sure, and is a systemic challenge for the world order. Now, that's why it's important that we take steps to protect ourselves.
The response from China has been swift. Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said, the statement issued by the US, the UK and Australia shows the 3 countries have gone further down the wrong and dangerous path for their own geopolitical self-interest, completely ignoring the concerns of the international community. It takes around 8 years to design and build a new nuclear sub, by which time the world is likely to be a very different place. John Cookson, Arise News.
And John Cookson joins us from London for more on this. John, great report as always. Please tell us a bit more and go into detail about the so-called AUKUS deal. When are we likely to see the results?
Hi there, great to be on Newsday as always. Well, this is a fairly long-term proposition here. As I said in my report, it takes about 8 years from the drawing board to creating a new nuclear-powered submarine. Now, the 3 nations here, the US, Australia, are thinking of a longer-term proposition, as I say, of maybe 2030 or 2040 before this new fleet of submarines is in place. So it's a long-term thing that's going on here, by which time, of course, the Chinese military might, which is currently 3rd biggest in the world with 2 million strong, will have grown considerably, and also the Chinese will have moved even further down the road of building these artificial islands in the Pacific, which is causing great concern to nations in that region, including Japan, Taiwan, Malaysia, and the rest. So it is something which is not going to happen overnight, although the 3 submarines for Australia are being bought from the US at a knockdown price of $3 billion. So the Australians will get these nuclear-powered submarines in fairly short order. It's the fleet that will take a long time to build. So this is a threat, it would seem, to the Chinese, who've reacted quite swiftly today, although a fairly muted response from their diplomat that you saw in my report.
That's right, and almost comes across as a as a firm response as well from Beijing. What's the general tone, and what do we expect to be Beijing's reaction, especially after we saw just yesterday that they're also building up their own defense?
Yes, we had that statement from the Chinese leader, President Xi, on Monday about building this wall of steel, a reference to China's military might. And Wang Wenbin today, diplomats will be poring over the words to see the tone of what he's saying. He spoke of a Cold War mentality, that he accused the three nations of motivating an arms race, which will be destabilizing for the world. He also said that the three nations were going down a path for their own geopolitical self-interest. So diplomatic speak, but relatively strong words there from the Chinese, and the message, I'm sure, getting clear to Washington, London and Canberra that the Chinese are not happy with this new AUKUS agreement.
Oh, thank you, John. Well, separately, the UK is boosting defence spending. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, well, Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has been warning for some months now that the Army, Navy and Air Force is being run down to what he said is an unacceptable level, and he's been asking for at least $12 billion extra in spending. Now, we heard from Sunak yesterday that the increase in spending will be to $6 billion, which is half of what he wants. Now, the Defence Secretary has been a little bit quiet in reaction to that announcement, and it may well be that it's reported that he wants Jens Stoltenberg's job running NATO, which becomes vacant later this year. So it may be that he's staying quiet because he wants to stay in post for the time being so he can slide into his new job. I'm being cynical there, but that may be exactly what's happening here.
Right. Now, John, with the war in Ukraine and the rest of the world being pulled in by the day, now China ramping up its military might, are we moving into a more dangerous era as we see each of the sides reacting to each other? And of course, we see the Western nations also reacting to the developments happening.
Yeah, I mean, we have to say yes. I mean, I think the Chinese are right. What's happening will trigger some sort of arms race in the years to come. It's not an immediate threat, but certainly, say, 10, 15 years from now, the world, as I said in my report, could be a very different place. I've lived through one of these eras, the so-called Cold War during the 60s and 70s. And what happened there was that Russia and America built up their nuclear arsenals, but they kind of balanced each other out. And the greatest crisis, the Cuban crisis in the early 1960s, was said not to happen because it was clear to both sides, to Washington and to Moscow, that if one of them fired a nuclear weapon, then that would lead to a nuclear holocaust. So, nuclear weapons are a deterrent in that respect. I think the bigger danger for the world is this war in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, which could escalate very, very quickly, and it would only take some kind of military strike by Russia, was not intended, but caused great damage to another country, for example, Poland, which is on the Ukrainian border, and that could all of a sudden escalate beyond all reason. And also other rogue states in the world. One thinks of Iran, which is clearly developing a nuclear weapon of its own, and North Korea. Let's not forget them. They have nuclear weapons, and Kim Jong-un, it would seem, would think about using it in the future. So I'm not particularly worried, having gone through this historical period in the 60s and 70s, there is an arms race, which of course is potentially very dangerous to the world. But the real danger, I think, comes from unexpected quarters, short notice, for example, through North Korea or Iran giving a nuclear weapon to one of these terrorist groups, which it could well do.
Well, thank you, John. And I'm going to go, into the technological aspect, because some concerns have been raised about how this pact will fit with future technological developments, in the sense that could they be more easily detectable by the time new submarines hit the water? I don't know if you're hearing any talk or concerns about that, but please share with us if you.
Technology is racing ahead. It's just quite incredible, breathtaking developments, and the Chinese, of course, are at the forefront of all of this. And the weapons of war have changed considerably from the First World War, when all sides went to war on horseback and finished in tanks. What's happened in 100 years since then is that we're moving into the world of drones and cruise missiles. And for sure, you're right, technology is going to change things, and it's going to change, the weapons of war. So you have to take a crystal ball here and say, how will things be in 10, 15 years from now? Who will be the superpowers? It seems it's going to be China, and if develops this alliance with Russia, then we've got this huge alliance of China and Russia together, and then we have America facing a presidential election next year. Things are so much in dynamic mode at the moment. Things are so fluid. It's very, very hard to predict what's going to happen in the future. But as far as weapons of war is concerned, these are being developed all the time to things that we can't even imagine these days.
And speaking, I know the future is uncertain, but this is the first time we're seeing Australia becoming actively involved in such a huge defense spending. Seldom hear about Australian defense relations at all. Now, what do you think, is the trajectory of this rise of Australia as a regional strategic defense power, the first time in history?
As far as the threat from China goes, I mean, Australia is very much in the front line. They are in the region. And if, for example, China invades Taiwan in the years to come, which is being predicted, then the region itself will be very unstable. So Australia is doing just the very thing that it ought to do. It's protecting its people. It's increasing its defence spending. And politically at the moment, there's a Prime Minister who is in favour of that. So acquiring these 3 nuclear power submarines is one would think the right thing to do. Important to stress, and I haven't said already, these submarines won't fire nuclear weapons. They're cruise missiles, mostly in development for these submarines. They're not like some of the nuclear submarines that the Brits have with nuclear weapons on board, and the Americans too. The Australians are not going down that path just yet, but Australia is doing exactly what it should do in the developing world and protecting its people.
All right, Chief Correspondent John Cookson, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday. We appreciate your time and analysis, as always.